In the world of HR right now, there's a huge battle going on. And no, it's not just about budgets or headcount. It's something way more fundamental. Today, we're going to dive deep into Lattice's 2026 State of People Strategy Report. We're going to unpack the hidden tensions that are pulling HR leaders in, well, every direction. And more importantly, how the best of the best are finding a way to win. So the big idea from the report is this. People teams are literally stuck in the middle. They're being pulled in all these different directions at once. And it's not just about juggling a few tasks. It's about managing these deep, conflicting pressures from every single corner of the business. It's forcing them into this really tough, often contradictory spot. So what does this big squeeze actually look like in practice? Well, on one hand, you've got this immense pressure from the top to justify the very existence of people programs and prove their financial return on investment. But at the exact same time, they're also supposed to navigate a politically polarized workplace, consolidate their tech stack to save money, and somehow pioneer innovation with AI. It's a massive tug-of-war with no easy answers. And that, right there, brings us to the biggest question of this whole explainer. When you're caught between all these opposing forces, what's the secret sauce? What does it actually take to build a high-performing people strategy? Well, the report has some pretty surprising answers. So let's get into it. Okay, the first major thing we need to understand is this balancing act of priorities. I mean, with all these competing demands, what are teams really choosing to focus on right now? Now, what's really fascinating here is the story this chart tells. For the first time in 6 years, performance management, coming in at 40%, has officially nudged past employee engagement as the #1 priority. But honestly, the real headline is that third bar. DEIB programs have plummeted to just 16%. And this shift, it isn't just a minor reshuffle, it sets up a massive tension right at the heart of modern people strategy. And that tension is exactly what the report calls the performance paradox. It's this simultaneous rise of a laser focus on performance metrics and the stark, kind of contradictory decline of investment in DEIB. This timeline just illustrates the story perfectly. If you rewind to 2023, the two were almost neck and neck. They were seen as two sides of the same coin. But since then, wow, they've split sharply, and they are heading in completely opposite directions. As that pressure for performance has climbed, the focus on DEIB has just cratered. Let's just pause on that number for a second. 16%. That's nearly a 50% drop from just a few years ago. Now, on the surface, it looks like companies are being forced into a tough choice, either drive hard performance or fostering inclusive culture. But the data really makes you wonder, are they making the right choice? Well, here is the paradox in black and white. When you split the data between the high-performing teams, the ones consistently crushing their goals, and the low-performing ones, the story just flips on its head. A full 30% of top teams are prioritizing DEIB. Compare that to a measly 6% of the rest. So here's the kicker. The very best teams aren't abandoning these programs. They're actually leaning in. Let that sink in. High performers are 5 times more likely to be focused on DEIB. This is not a coincidence, folks. It strongly suggests that cutting these programs isn't some savvy business move to focus on performance. It might actually be a huge strategic mistake that undermines it. And this, right here, this is the key. The most effective teams, they're not treating this as an either-or decision. They get that a culture of trust and psychological safety, which is fostered through DEIB, is one of the most powerful drivers of the kind of risk-taking and innovation that fuels high performance. The two are, and they have always been, better together. Okay, let's move on to our next tension and see how this all connects. It's not just about what programs to prioritize. It's also about the people you're building them for, and specifically the conflicting philosophies between different generations in the workplace. This table gives us such a fantastic snapshot. You've got the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, and they're primarily driven by personal growth and development. But then you look at the more tenured generations like Gen X and baby boomers, and they're focused on strategic influence and being trusted advisors. So everybody wants to build a great workplace, but their core motivations and the challenges they're seeing are fundamentally different. And nowhere is this divide more obvious than when you talk about return to office policies. I mean, look at this gap. A staggering 83% of baby boomers are on board with their company's RTO plan. But for Gen Z, less than half at 44%. That is a massive chasm in how each generation sees the very nature of where and how work should get done. So how on earth do you bridge a divide that big? Well, this quote from Natalie Breeze over at ThreadUp just nails it. The goal isn't to pick a winner, right? It's not about deciding which generation is correct. It's about building systems, things like reverse mentoring or cross-generational project teams, where all these different perspectives become a source of strength and innovation, not conflict. Now, this challenge of bridging different perspectives isn't just about people. It's also about the tools they use. And that brings us to our final and maybe most urgent tension, the tech tug of war. This is that classic battle between the pressure to cut costs today versus the absolute need to invest in the tools that are going to define tomorrow. The pressure from leadership is very real, and it is intense. Over half, 55% of all HR teams are being told point blank to consolidate their technology and slash their budgets. The mandate is crystal clear. Spend less money on software, and this is a huge but. Here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. While your average teams are being forced to cut back, nearly half of all high-performing teams are using 6 or more different HR tools. That's double the average. So they're not cutting back, they're strategically investing in a more specialized, more effective tech stack. And of course, the biggest driver of this whole tech tension is AI. You knew it was coming. Look at this incredible adoption gap. Half of all high-performing HR teams are already using agentic AI regularly in their workflow. For low-performing teams, that number is just 6%. The best teams see AI not as a cost to be minimized, but as a critical advantage to be maximized. And believe me, they are moving fast. So this really frames the essential question every single leader needs to be asking themselves right now. Do you see your technology as just a line item on a spreadsheet to be slashed in the short term? Or do you see it as a fundamental, long-term strategic advantage that you need to invest in if you want to win? Okay, this all brings us to the really powerful conclusion of the report. It's all about how to resolve these tensions and find a real path forward. And the secret, as it turns out, is about having the courage to win in the middle. So the single most important takeaway is this. The winners aren't picking a side. They're not falling into these false choices. They're not choosing performance over DEIB. They're not siding with boomers against Gen Z. And they aren't just cutting costs or blindly investing in tech. They're rejecting the or and they're embracing the and. Instead, they're doing the hard, messy work of wading into what the report calls the sticky middle. They're building these integrated systems where all these seemingly opposing forces actually support and strengthen one another, where DIB becomes the engine for performance, where generational differences fuel creative solutions, and where AI automates tedious work to make processes more human, not less. And that leaves us with one final thought. Every single organization out there is facing these exact same tensions right now. So the question for you to take back with you is this. Are you forcing your teams to pick a side, to make a false choice? Or are you doing the necessary, challenging work of building the systems that allow everyone to win together?